Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. It is me, your professional nerd, and with me as always is our Dynasty captain, Jeff Bell. We talked about rookie wide receivers because we had a whole mess of them earlier this week, and this week we're going to continue with that trend again, except this time we're going to talk about quarterbacks and running backs together. We're not going to do tight ends. Brock Bowers is good. He's a tight end one. Go and get him. No one else matters right now. So with that being said, we're going to start with Caleb Williams. We've already kind of talked about this. Just because Jayden Daniels is good, it doesn't mean Caleb Williams sucks, and that Chicago made the wrong decision. And Caleb Williams has been productive, and it seems that it doesn't matter just because Jayden Daniels is having the greatest quarterback season of all time. You're still at the same spot with Caleb Williams, but do you think that at this point Jayden Daniels is ahead of Caleb Williams in Dynasty?
For me, no. I understand if people do have him there. I don't blame you for having him there. I still would probably rather have Caleb Williams. I mean, maybe I'm wrong there because of the ability of Jayden Daniels to be a better fantasy quarterback than Caleb Williams. I mean, I think that is legitimate. It's almost a little bit of the Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors argument that we talked about in the wide receiver episode. But to me, I think you're seeing everything that you would want to see from Caleb Williams. You're seeing over 300 yards in 2 of the last 3 games, over 70% of completion over his last 2 games, turnover-free football over his last 2 games, winning football over his last 2 games. I mean, those are all the things that you're hoping to see out of this player, that number 1 pick in this class and the quarterback that we've been waiting on. So I'm still very, very bullish on Caleb Williams' long-term outlook.
Yeah, and he even gave you those 34 yards on the ground. Like,
he could do that.
Yeah, he's not going to be Jayden Daniels in that regard, but he's still going to give you a little bit of that rushing floor. If anything, I would consider it more like Daniel Jones in that regard, except that Caleb Williams could throw the ball much better. And if you think about how well Daniel Jones played 2 years ago, or I would say how many fantasy points he gave you because of just that safe rushing floor. Imagine having 250 yards of passing on top of that a game, and he has that. Another thing that, we talked about this with Remo Dunze in our last episode about Shane Waldron. If anything, you should be more encouraged because he's done so well despite Shane Waldron and despite the offensive line woes. These are things that should make you like him and more. I mean, you could worry about him being Andrew Luck behind that offensive line, but I'm not worried about him as a skill standpoint. So if there's anyone who's stupid enough to sell, you're definitely going to buy if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
The real question is, are you still drafting someone like Joe Burrow ahead of Caleb Williams at this point, or are you still going to take Caleb?
Dude, we did a quarterback show in the summer, and I had Caleb Williams above Joe Burrow. You know this, Jag. You know this.
I know, but things change. I have to ask.
The people need to know. Yes, I would
Yeah.
still take Caleb Williams over Joe Burrow in a startup.
All right. I just have to make sure. Before we go any further, we're going to pay some bills. Hit the like and subscribe button if you want more content just like this. You can go back and see our wide receivers episode, and then we had our week 6 risers and fallers. Go over to footballguys.com/plans where you can see us write as well as not just run our mouths. Jeff handles the round table over there. I'm deep in the rookie prospects if you're a sicko. So go and check that stuff out. Next, we have the star, the next Messiah, Lisan Al-Gaib, Jayden Daniels. You want to talk about someone who's going to you keep wondering how Cliff Kingsbury stays employed. Maybe he's just a good scout. He knows where to go to where he's like, man, they're going to draft this QB and I can keep a job for another contract because he's lighting it up. He's leading an EPA. He's making the Commanders look like legitimate contenders at 4-1. Where do you think Jayden Daniels is in comparison to Dynasty? Now, obviously, he's a round 1 pick in Superflex. In single QB, you almost want to chase the upside a little bit more.
Yeah.
With that, I mean, that definitely in single QB, you would put him ahead of Caleb Williams, right?
Yes, in single QB, yes, I would because of exactly what you said, chasing the upside.
Yeah. I mean, this is like Lamar Jackson made all over. I guess as a whole, do you think there's any room for this to slow down? Or do you think he can maintain this pace?
He can certainly maintain this pace as long as he stays healthy. I mean, I think we all see him out there. He doesn't exactly look like this isn't Cam Newton and Josh Allen kind of like barreling around out there. It does kind of look like one wrong hit will knock him out because he is kind of a little bit more of a lanky player. So that would be my only concern. But I think talent wise, it's there. I think it's legitimate. I think he's a big time player that has stepped up in big time moments. There's a really interesting series that Amazon Prime has that's talking about NIL, and it followed several of the stars around LSU, and it followed Jayden Daniels around LSU a little bit, and just it was really interesting to see his basically zest for the moment, and you saw that in that Monday night game against Joe Burrow, the way that he knew that that was a big time moment and performed there, and so that's what you love to see.
Is that worth watching? I saw that.
It's interesting. It's
mm,
yeah, gosh, what's her Olivia Dunn? Libby Dunn.
Livy Dunn, yeah,
Yeah, she's on it. The
Angel
Angel
Reese.
Reese. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and there's I think there's maybe one other player on it, but Jayden Daniels is on it. It's interesting to check out.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a TV review from Jeff and view on a quarterback. There's nothing bad to say about Daniels. Right now, he's just a complete package, and he's the ultimate nightmare for a defense. He's doing it with his legs. Now he's doing it with his arms. And another thing that's encouraging is they don't have a wide receiver too. They don't have a second target. I don't think Zach Ertz is kind of there. Ben Sinnott is an H back still right now. That doesn't mean he can't develop a little bit more. We know how Cliff Kingsbury deploys these tight ends, and he has a death grip on Zach Ertz. So maybe that's something happens next year. But right now we're seeing Noah Brown, De'Ami Brown, this Zacchaeus, Alameda Zacchaeus out there. Realistically, I think that they're going to probably would. I mean, they need a lot of help on defense. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're in position to draft one of these top defensive players that they do it. But I wouldn't be surprised either if they go get a second wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they go trade for a second wide receiver. We're seeing all these wide receivers hitting the trade market, supposedly led by Devontae Adams at 4-1. I think they have to be pretty excited about where they stand, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them get in that trade market for a receiver or to be a primary destination for a player like a T Higgins or somebody like that in the free agent market. Because Jayden Daniels is showing himself to be the type of player that players want to play with. And that's one of the biggest benefits of having this quarterback on a rookie contract, on a cost controlled contract, is the ability to augment him with talent. And yeah, 4-1, the way he's playing, that should be a destination franchise, especially now that Daniel Snyder is out of the picture. I think that they will be big players in terms of acquiring talent.
Yeah, and that Dan Snyder being gone is the big thing there because you and I have talked about this. It's a top-down problem with organizations, and if you have a crappy owner, especially a crappy owner that's hands-on, it's hard to even trust that franchise. So having someone like Magic Johnson even in that building, and you think about how he'll want the team build, I definitely think in the future they're just going to load that place up with stars.
Well, and Josh Harris, as what he has done for the 76ers, you look at the
Mm,
76ers having Joel Embiid, going out and getting James Harden, bringing in Paul George in free agency. The 76ers have not been shy in Josh Harris's involvement there of going out and bringing big names in. I think the Commanders see themselves in Washington positioned that way. We've always seen that this is one of the most valuable franchises in the NFL. It's just that there was some awful ownership there for a window that players didn't want to play for. They're going to add big time players to the Commanders. I
yep.
firmly believe that.
Yeah, having a franchise quarterback on automatically makes you a free agency destination more than not. Speaking of free agency destinations, the opposite of that is the Patriots right now. There have been rumblings that Gerard Mayo may be forced to play Drake Maye. I am not a fan of this from a football standpoint, but I did hear a good point out there that it's mainly locker room pressure at this point where, if you practice with someone like Drake Maye every day, you see what he can do out there, and then you're putting your body on the line and you're not even getting the satisfaction of competition, it's a problem, which means at this point, I have nothing to tell you as far as a eval that I haven't told you as a rookie that I think Drake May is a very good prospect. Besides the fact that if you're going to buy him, now might be the time because his value could skyrocket at this point if he goes out there and does perform. So, Jeff, I want to ask you, where are you with the nature versus nurture of it all? Do you think they should just put him out there and see what happens, or would you rather see him just sit and come back next year with hopefully some new toys, bolstered offensive line, maybe a new weapon?
I If the locker room is saying that they need to put Drake May in, then I think that they need to put Drake May in.
Yeah.
That's kind of I think you make the exact point there that the players see in practice, they know who gives them the best chance of winning. And if they think Drake May gives them a better chance of winning than Jacoby Brissett, then I think you need to play Drake May. I understand environment and the importance there and having legitimate receiving options. Some of it's, let's see if any of these receivers can play with Drake May, and let's figure it out there, because that's the one thing that you don't want the question of, well, could these players play with Drake? I don't know. It's like, could Demario Douglas be the slot receiver for Drake May offense? Do we know? No, we don't know that. So that I think is, you want to get some answers in a lost season like this, but it's still very early. And so that's where I am hesitant on putting him out right now. But again, if you're going to lose the locker room, then that kind of necessitates that you need to make that move. And some of it is Drake May needs to learn to protect himself.
Yeah. Um, I agree, and I do think he's just more mobile than Jacoby Brissett is. He's just a limited player. He could throw downfield. Believe it or not, the one drive he played, it was a scoring drive, or at least he led him to a scoring opportunity at that point, and in a losing game. So I guess I think I'm speaking more of as a Pats fan than I am as like a real, I guess, football brain here. But I agree with the point that I definitely think that if it's a locker room that's a problem, you got to play Drake May. That's just not a question. If the locker room says like, "Hey, we just got to eat it, and the next year will be better," that's fine. But I don't think anyone is willing to do that. And it just, I think people really don't understand how much tanking does. You talked about like Josh Harris, whatever. Uh, that's the only team I've seen do well, but they quit tanking and they just started getting players at that point. Just when you create a losing culture, no one wants to go there. No one wants to go. It's like, all right, we're going to go. Remember the Browns? We're going to go to the Browns. So we're playing for whatever next big guy is going to come and save us. And then we're going to play for the next big guy that's going to save us because the big guy we just got needs help. And you're in this cycle. So I think I'm going to be less of a grumpy pants about it, and I just want to see Drake May, which also means a ripple effect that Demario Douglas has looked really good, and he's been vocal about wanting the football. He's been open. He's a solid player. Now that he could get targets downfield or on time at least, that can be intriguing. Jalen Polk is someone who is the wide receiver one right now. He just doesn't look like it because Jacoby Brissett he really can't throw outside of the hashes and past the 15 right now.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's limits everything that you can do already with limited skill talent.
yeah. Next, we have Jonathan Brooks. We were down bad because we had Bryce Young. Now we have Andy Dalton and things look better, but Chuba Hubbard looks good. He's a good player right now, which makes me wonder when we're going to see Jonathan Brooks, and if you're really holding on to him, like in redraft, holding on to him might kill your season at this point. In Dynasty, it's more of those things. If you're a contender and you drafted him, is it time to maybe move Jonathan Brooks to go get a running back that is playing on a good team? They consider that, if you're thinking in a smaller window with these running backs.
Yeah, I think it's worth considering, because I do think that you can still do that, because I think people are wrong on Chuba Hubbard, and I've been saying it for a couple months that Chuba Hubbard is a better football player than what people realize, and he is doing it now. He's producing, and I think that you're starting to move away from. I've been the guy that's been asking the question of, one, why are you going to bench Chuba Hubbard when he's been one of the most productive running backs in the NFL? Two, you're going to be bringing Jonathan Brooks back injured off of a lost season. You're just not going to remove Chuba Hubbard from the lineup, and so you're looking at a split backfield. The way the John or Chuba Hubbard is the type of player that has solidified himself as a leader with the Panthers. They probably want to keep that type of player around. I'm starting to wonder if, like, is this not a 2024 issue of a split backfield, but a legitimate moving forward into the next window issue where it's not the worst thing in the world to have two good running backs, and maybe you are running into a situation where you've got two good running backs and Chuba Hubbard's playing for the next several seasons as the Carolina Panther, and Jonathan Brooks is never that bell cow guy that's getting every single touch.
Yeah, and we keep looking at the model for these types of players, and it's the Lions, where you have your ground and pound player like David Montgomery, and Chuba fits a little bit more of that. Not quite as good, but he's definitely the tougher runner. And then Jonathan Brooks is this 1B change of pace guy. It really makes you wonder, like, especially now, I've got a lot of contenders with Jonathan Brooks because, I was drafting 110, 111, or I had an early second, and so I've got a lot of Brooks, and I'm just willing to move them to a contender to get something I want now because, like you said, I, I'm even worried. I'm worried about running backs in general, and I'm reluctant. A lot of people are saying, Ashton Jeanty should be the RB or should be the number one overall prospect in the next class. If we look at Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, should they really? Like if anything, I think it should be Tet McMillan right now because these wide receivers just have more value to NFL teams. And we keep saying, why doesn't this guy get more touches? Just get the ball. We've seen the NFL, guys. It's a tough game. I don't think like we're never going to see a team want to give their player 20 touches anymore. I don't think so. Like no one wants to give the running back 20 touches like that.
I think it's not only that, but two, I think you see such a divide in especially analytically minded organizations that do not value the running back position relative to, you see what the Cowboys are doing now with Rico Dotto. You see what the Chiefs are doing, essentially bringing Isaiah Pacheco off of Nowheresville and then now bringing Kareem Hunt off the scrap heap to kind of step in there. So you're getting a fundamental divide where those teams are not interested in taking backs early. The other half of the teams are interested in taking backs early, and then they run into a situation where whoever it might be, Braylon Allen or whatever this back is far and away their best player on their board, and so they're going to go ahead and take him. And then all of a sudden, now you've got Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson. Well, Tyler Algier is pretty good back. Maybe we're just going to play him because we don't want to put everything on Bijan Robinson because we recognize it's a long season. And yeah, how many years do we need to see these good running backs that we're excited about land in quote unquote bad situations behind other backs before we realize half the organizations value running backs and half the organizations don't? And the cost is worthwhile for the organizations that do to have multiple good running backs.
Yeah, and just for the sake of it, because this conversation basically is going to hit the next two running backs that we're going to talk about. Trey Benson with the Cardinals. That's someone I really liked. He was actually my RB1 over Jonathan Brooks at the time, and I thought he had the best situation. But turns out James Conner's not as cooked as everyone thought he was, and that's a mistake that I made as well. Especially when you consider you're kind of anticipating that health factor. It's been the year of the old running back, and I don't know if that particular asset will continue. But it's like you're saying. I think, let's say next year people are counting, 4 running backs that you just can't miss on. You can't miss on Travion Henderson. You can't miss on Jeanty. You can't miss on Ollie Gordon. You probably count on Ollie Gordon at this point, but realistically, you're going to have 2 guys that are going to be even in RB1 territory, let alone in the RB1 territory, because you got to think about it. We're talking about, well, Breece Hall is the actual RB1 this year. And then where's Breece Hall at? Now he's got Braylon Allen, back there. And then Braylon Allen's going to be a problem. So it's, I will say it's just a down year for young running back prospects. And it's it's going to be an increasingly difficult strategy to build your team around the idea that this running back is going to come onto my roster and then fix that problem, even on them contenders.
Yeah, and looking at Connor, so I think that it's fair to think, well, okay, maybe they just assumed that James Conner would be gone after this year, and so they drafted Trey Benson in on the day 2 of the draft. Well, is somebody going to break the bank for James Conner in free agency? I would be a little bit surprised to see a team break the bank for James Conner in free agency. So at some point, James Conner will say, well, I like being in Arizona, and Arizona will say, we like having you and you're productive, and why don't you come back? And that, I think that, I think it's fair to be a little bit nervous about Benson's immediate production window, and Connor hanging around for a couple more years, more than people kind of assumed when that pick was made. That being said, Trey Benson's a pretty young prospect, so
it could be Tank Bigsby all over again type thing.
Yeah, and absolutely that, and it could be. I think that these are the guys that you really want to go out and buy in Dynasty, that you feel like you're just disappointed and they're going to be stuck, because things change a lot faster in the NFL than what people realize.
Yeah. I'm finding it, or at least the way I did it this year was incorrect, but I find running back to be, and I get everyone says like quarterback. I find running back to be the hardest position to project year over year. And I mean that as a prospect evaluator. I mean that just as a fantasy guy. They're running backs weird, and that's why I don't like them. Next, we have Blake Corum. Blake Corum saw the field. He looked okay. But it's same song sung by a different artist at this point, where if anything it's worse. Kyron Williams is the guy, and I was wrong on that one. He's basically Sean McVay's son at this point, and he's the only thing on that offense. Long term with Blake Corum, like, what do you do with him? He's just one of those handcuffs. Like, he's basically Jordan Mason kind of at this point, if you think about it. Like, he could boom if Kyron goes down, but that's only if Kyron goes down.
Yep. That's basically what you're dealing with. Yeah, it's kind of, you hit the nail on the head there. He's a handcuff that is not going to be a standalone value. Standalone value is not a real thing. Kyron Williams goes down, then yeah, Jordan Mason is a great analogy there.
Yeah. Next one is Bucky Irving. Believe it or not, Bucky Irving's someone I liked early on, and then when you get that 5th round draft capital, and then you have a low RAS, I was like, oh wow, it's Kyron all over again. And then it might be Kyron all over again in a good way, because he's the best runner right now for the Buccaneers, and he continually eats into that workload. I just bought him for a second in one of our listener leagues, and I don't regret it so far. So.
Yeah, they're pretty insistent that they still like Rachaad White. It's going to be a split backfield. I think that the Buccaneers like Rachaad White a lot more than fantasy Twitter likes Rachaad White, so that's a real thing.
Is it realistic that Bucky Irving could be the wide receiver or running back 1 out of this class after the end of the year?
I mean, the way people gush about him, yeah, it's realistic. I mean,
should he be, I guess, is the right answer then.
I'm a little hesitant on Maye saying that he should be.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy that I have to ask that question at this point. Let's put it that way. We'll get through these next 2 pretty quick. We already talked about Tyrone Tracy earlier this week, so if you want to go back and look at that episode, we talked about him in depth. Jeff, you had concerns long term this season because Devin Singletary, like we keep talking about it, coaches like their guys. Devin Singletary is a day ball guy. They really like him. And he's been productive enough. I don't know. At least he does what players say, but he could be something next season. I said that we should pay a third for him at the most, and you shouldn't get crazy because that is something that you can gamble and lose, and it won't hurt you that much. You still feel that way?
Yeah, I think that that's fair. I mean, I would definitely give a third for Tyrone Tracy right now. I think that this is why this is why you want to stockpile. Seconds are nice, but thirds, and then you just want to be able to take as many shots as possible on these backs. I mean, we're not going to talk about Braylon Allen tonight, but that's another back where you just want to be able to stockpile those 3rd round picks, especially early 3rd round picks, is where you can get a lot of these guys when you get into your rookie drafts, and you just build year after year. You keep doing that, repeating that process. All of a sudden, you have 11 of these guys on your team, and you're going to have 2 startable guys every single week without dumping a premium asset into a running back.
Yep. The next guy, and I actually bumped Braylon Allen for him because we talked a little bit about Braylon Allen. We need to just talk about Marshawn Lloyd. Emmanuel Wilson's kind of a jag. He's playing well for being a jag, but what is he just kind of Kendre Miller at this point because we don't really know where he's going to be.
Um, my read on the situation is that Emmanuel Wilson is a player that the coaching staff likes, and they saw an opportunity because roster gymnastics are real. They saw an opportunity to be able to stash Marshawn Lloyd on IR and play the backup that they do like in Wilson. I think that Lloyd has struggled to pick up maybe some of the aspects and that the Packers wanted him to pick up. And so it's kind of one of those things. We keep him around the team. He gets to learn. The pressure's off of him. We like this other backup. And you kind of almost have to write the shear off for Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird because I look at Emmanuel Wilson and it's mental gymnastics for me to want to almost like Marshawn Lloyd first, but like him more, just because you see what he could be in that offense. But again, I think this is going to be a next year thing we need to wait on. And overall, what should have been a much better running back class than what we thought is just as disappointing as it always has been. Some other guys we didn't talk about, Jalen Wright kind of popped back up and seems like a thing. Anything else that we're missing before we go?
I mean, Braylon Allen, we talked about him. Ray Davis, I think, is
A wash.
since I think that Ty Johnson would play probably above Ray Davis, or at least it would be a split if James Cook is going to be out and miss time. But you want these guys, like you want your bench to be full of these guys, because these are the guys that turn into the Jordan Mason, and all of a sudden Jordan Mason is a top 12 player this year, and that's how you build the depth that we always say, load up at high end wide receiver, get two good quarterbacks, a tight end that is actually a tight end is a kind of nice thing to have, and then a deep stable of these guys, because they'll pop off for 129 yards like we saw with Tyrone Tracy. But real quick on the Packers, I think you need to recognize that the Packers are a slow moving organization that trust is very important with the Packers. It's like the Packers and the Steelers, I feel like, are very similar in terms of you got to earn trust before you're going to get opportunity. And Marshawn Lloyd, relative to Emmanuel Wilson, just hasn't earned trust.
Yeah, and I love that you said they're slow moving, and I think they're one that you can trust to develop talent.
Yes.
Because they keep doing
Yes.
it. And again, we talk about how organizations are ran. Even though they've had new coaches, it seems that culture and philosophy has or they at least go out and get coaches who embody that same philosophy. So I'm willing to hold Lloyd. I'm not going to go crazy buying him unless it's in like a package deal. That'll do it, guys. We'll see you guys next week. Like I said, if you want to talk about all the wide receivers, we have another episode. Jeff, you got anything fun coming up?
Just the same old Jag. As Joe and Clayton always say, we are in Groundhog's Day.
Yeah, Groundhog's Day. It's a same thing, different week. Me and Jeff will be on Sunday Morning Live over on the other channel at the end of this week if you want to talk about start sits. Other than that, guys, I'm Jagger May. That's Jeff Bell. Love you, and we'll see you on the next one.